Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the John Campea Show here on my YouTube channel. I, of course, am your host, John Campea, and it is a wonderful honor and a privilege to have you joining me today. The fact that you guys would take out some time in your precious time today to join me is an honor and humbling, and I'm so glad you guys are here because we're all friends here who love movies and television, here to talk about our favorite things, which is, of course, movies and television. Now, you might be able to tell that at the moment, I am not in my regular studio. I am not at home. I am actually at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. And you know, what happened was I got, for most of you know right now that my wife, Anne, is on a 2-month, she's right in the middle now of a 2-month work trip to Hong Kong for Hasbro. And and I've been working nonstop. And anyway, one of the viewers, one of you guys, wrote to me and said, "Hey, John, you have been working every day for 3 months straight." And it's true. I have not taken a single day off yet in 3 months. And they said, "Come on out to Vegas. It's on us. Come on out to Vegas and hang out here. You can do your show from here. At least relax a little bit." And I said, you know what? I could really use that. So special thanks to people putting me up here in Las Vegas. I am having a wonderful time here so far. And I'm really glad that the internet in here is working. Now, I'm going to give you guys a big heads up here. I can't vouch that the internet in the hotel is going to hold up for the whole show, but I'm going to do my very best to make this thing work. So let me know in the chat board if you guys can hear me okay and if everything's working all right. So here's how today's show's going to go. I've got a couple of items in the world of movie news I want to talk about. Then I'm going to take the questions that you guys have emailed in to me. And then after that, I'm going to save a few minutes to take some questions from you guys via Twitter. So how do you tweet a question to me? It's simple. Just tweet me at John Campea. So start your tweet with at John Campea. I'll even show you guys how to do it. Let me bring it up here. Remember, I'm not in my studio, so today's show is going to be a little bit more clunky. So start your tweet with at John Campea and then tweet it to me. Hopefully I'll get it and that part will all go off without a hitch, and then we will be good to go. So with all of that out of the way, let's get started with the first topic today. And the first topic today is this, guys. A lot of people excited, a lot of people talking about Blade Runner 2049. Look, I've been saying, everybody knows, I'm not a big fan of the original. I'm one of the very, very few odd creatures that didn't actually like the first Blade Runner. I know most people really love it, and that's awesome. Didn't work for me. Then I saw the first trailer, and I didn't think the first trailer was all that good, so I wasn't all that excited. Although finding out that Denis Villeneuve was going to be directing it is awesome, because he's incredible. But then the second trailer came out. And you guys remember, I watched the second trailer, I'm like, okay, now we got something. This looks really good. So I've been getting kind of excited for it, even though I never thought I would be. Anyway, some early screenings have happened back in Los Angeles. And while there are no reviews up yet, because there is a review embargo, the studio did say that the people who saw the movie were allowed to do social media posts about it. And the social media posts have been insane. Check out, I've just picked out a couple of them here, but this kind of is representative of all of them. So we got Jordan Hoffman, out in New York City there. Good news, Blade Runner 2049 is a terrific continuation. You get JoeBlow.com with my buddy Jimmy O. Says, our own Jimmy O calls Blade Runner astonishing, more than just a visual effects wonder. It's groundbreaking science fiction. You guys all know William Bibbiani, and Bibbiani said, I saw Blade Runner and it's breathtaking. It's an impressive follow-up. You got Eric Eisenberg, a guy I know over there at Cinema Blend, saying, Denis Villeneuve is unquestionably one of the elite working directors, and there's no excuses if Deakins doesn't win the Oscar, obviously for Best Cinematography. So the word is coming in. 2049, Blade Runner 2049 is apparently really good. Apparently it's a great follow-up. People like, it's not just these ones, but if you go through all the tweets of the people who have put up stuff like this, they're all saying like, it's just astonishing, groundbreaking science fiction. Now, I'll take a little bit of a breath because a few people saw Mother before I did. And some of the reaction from Mother is, one of the most amazing artistic pieces of film of all time and blah, 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 blah. And I ended up hating. Well, hate is too strong a word because I admired the attempt. But I ended up not liking Mother at all. It got an F cinema score. So let's keep that in mind. But this is a little bit different. People seem to be really, really impressed. And not only do people seem to be impressed, they seem to think that other people are really going to like the movie when they see it. And I trust their judgment. So we could be in for a really great treat with Blade Runner 2049. That second trailer got my engine revving. Now it's official. I'm on board. I'm fully excited. I cannot wait to see this. Hopefully I like it a lot more than the first Blade Runner, because again, I'm one of those weird, odd purple ducks that doesn't fit in because I didn't like the first one. But here we go. The second one is looking like it's going to be amazing. So I'm really excited about that. What do you guys think? Are you guys stoked to hear about this? This could really affect its opening weekend box office. This sounds like it's an incredible attempt at this. Everybody's even saying Ryan Gosling's great. They're saying Jared Leto's great. Obviously, everybody's saying Harrison Ford's great. So what were your expectations about Blade Runner 2049? Were you just hoping it would be good? Are you really encouraged hearing these tweets coming out, or does it do nothing for you? Are you still kind of taking a wait and see attitude about Blade Runner 2049? Jump into the comment section and let me know what you guys think. All right, let's move on to the next topic here. Star Trek Discovery has made its television debut. It obviously came up on CBS, and it's part of that whole CBS All Access nonsense. I still think it's a mistake that they're doing that. Anyway, I was one of these guys, I've talked about this in a few days recently, that thought this movie, or this television show, I should say, was going to be an absolute train wreck, an exercise in train wreckery. That's what I thought Star Trek was going to be. And then I watched it, and you know me, guys, like I just call it like I see it. Doesn't matter if I think it's going to suck in advance or if I think it's going to be graded in advance. If I think it's good or if I think it's bad, I'm going to say if it's good or it's bad, regardless of what I thought. I thought Star Trek Discovery was going to be a train wreck. I loved it. And I know there are some hardcore Star Trek fans out there that didn't. Fair enough. That's fine. All media is subjective and everything. But I thought it was terrific. Now, it's only 15 episodes, and that seems to be the trend these days, doing like 10 to 15 episodes, or if you're Game of Thrones, 6. So it's only got 15 episodes. So it's still a big question mark in the air right now as to whether or not, Discovery is going to be successful or not. Like, I think it succeeded in being a very good show, but will people actually sign up to CBS All Access and watch it? Those are the questions still hanging. But here's an interesting bit of news that just came out about that. Alex Kurtzman, because you remember, you might recognize his name. Kurtzman and Roberta Orci were a writing team for ages and ages and ages. They did a lot of big blockbuster films. Anyway, Alex Kurtzman, who's now the showrunner of the show, he said, he was asked about if the show all works and everything, when will season 2 happen? And he said this, probably 2019. 2019? Like, you're taking a gamble, you're taking a risk on this show. And I get that, you're taking a risk and all that kind of stuff. But to me, you're taking a risk. You have to at least be prepared. You have to be prepared to pull the plug on it, for sure, absolutely. But since you're rolling the dice and taking a risk, you got to be prepared to move on this thing if it works. If you start seeing people signing up for CBS All Access and all that kind of stuff, and the audience is enjoying it, and it's getting bigger numbers than people thought it was going to get, if all that is happening, you've got to be prepared to move and get that thing going. I honestly cannot think of a worse thing to do with this new Star Trek franchise that you're hoping people will like, and you're rolling the dice on it, that if you're lucky enough that people enjoy it and some people sign up for CBS All Access and all that kind of stuff, to go, oh, you liked it? Okay, well, come back in 2 years and we'll have something for you. That is not how you're killing your own momentum. You're absolutely killing your own momentum. Now, I don't want to act like this is a doomsday scenario. It's not a doomsday scenario, okay? It's not. Even though the way I'm saying it sounds like a doomsday, it's not a doomsday scenario. I know this. But it's still a bad idea that is not going to help you at all. Be ready for this thing to be a success. You know what they always say? Expect the worst, be prepared for the best. So yes, be ready for the worst. That, okay, it's a bomb, nobody's watching it, people aren't signing up to CBS All Access. Okay, pull the plug on season 2, no problem. But be ready for it to be a success. So if it's successful, you don't want to kill the positive momentum you just build up by now making the audience wait for 2 years for the new one. So I don't know what they're thinking, and that's fine. That's up to them. But I really hope they change their strategy. I mean, you don't want to rush it, but you don't need 2 years to get, 15, 13 episodes together. Every other show out there can get that many episodes out every single year. you can be prepared to do it every single year too. I think you should be prepared for that. And maybe they'll change their minds. Who knows? Okay, guys, with that news stuff out of the way, I'm going to move on now to the part of the show where I take your live questions. Once again, if you've got a live question that you want to see on the John Campea Show, simply email me anytime. For now, at thejohncampeapodcast@gmail.com. That email address will be changing by next week, but for now, I'm still using thejohncampeapodcast@gmail.com. Two important things to keep in mind. Keep your email to 90 words or less, or else I can't fit it on the screen. And also keep in mind that I get a lot of emails, so you may not see it on the show, but to send it on in and maybe you will see it pop up. Okay, with that out of the way, let's go to the first question of the day. And the first question today comes to us from Roderick Kingsley, who writes, people hate a lot on the MCU villains as mediocre. And with the exception of Loki, Red Skull, Mordo, and Ronin, I tend to agree with them. However, in my opinion, the DCEU villains have been infinitely worse. We have so far gotten Zod, who was all right, but other than Lex, Doomsday, Ares, Lex, Doomsday, Ares, and the magical duo in Suicide Squad are honestly some of the worst villains I've ever seen. And I liked all those movies. Anyway, what are your thoughts? Well, thanks a lot for the question, Roderick. And yeah, I think it's with the MCU, I didn't take account. What are they on? 15, 16, they're movie number 17, I've lost count. And so far with the DCEU being on film, well, what do we got? We had Man of Steel, we had Batman vs. Superman, Suicide Squad, Wonder Woman. So we're going into film number 5, okay? Going into film number 5 with that. I think it's safe to say that neither of the big comic book producing companies have exactly been hitting with a high batting average for their villains, like either Marvel or DC. And you even mentioned Mordo as one of the good villains. He wasn't a villain in Doctor Strange. He will become a villain, yes, but he wasn't a villain in Doctor Strange, so you can't even count him. Red Skull was good, yes. Loki, obviously very good. I did like Ronin the Accuser. Some people didn't like Ronin the Accuser. I liked Ronin the Accuser, but that's like 3 out of like 14 or 15 movies. And Michael Keaton was really good as Vulture, if you want to count, even though Spider-Man Homecoming was a Sony Marvel film. If you want to count it as an MCU movie, sure. So maybe people seem to like Michael Keaton, but that's a lot of movies where people did not like their villains, me included. Now, remember, I always bring this up because I think it's important to keep in mind. With the MCU, Kevin Feige said normally they don't want to put a lot of emphasis on their villains because they want the emphasis to be on their heroes. Okay, I get that. And it's tough to argue with that because that formula has worked and continues to work. But, it's nice to see the villain get a little bit more spotlight. It gives some more dramatic effect and impact when your villain can be really good, when your villain can have a little bit more of the spotlight shone on them. That can just make for a better overall movie if you give it a chance. Now, okay, so let's get down to the question. Who's done it worse? Like we're all saying here, I think we will all acknowledge that both the MCU and the DCEU so far have not exactly done a stellar job with their villains. Okay, we'll all agree on that. So which one is struggling worse? It's hard to say. Now, some people might be quick to jump on and say, well, the DC has had the worst villains. Just this lady right here is probably the cream of the crop. Let's take a couple things into consideration here. Okay, Christopher Nolan's Batman films are not DCEU, but they are DC. So let's count those for now, okay? While DC has been struggling with their villains, I don't think there's any argument that the greatest villain of any comic book movie ever has been Heath Ledger's Joker. Some of you might disagree with that, and that's cool, but even those of you who disagree will acknowledge that probably most people feel that the best comic book villain we've had so far is that Heath Ledger Joker. He's probably the best. And I don't think that General Zod in Man of Steel was just an okay villain. I think General Zod was an awesome villain. I will find him. I thought he was an awesome villain. I thought he was incredible. Okay, did Enchantress suck? Yes. I liked Wonder Woman. If you saw my review, I like Wonder Woman very much. But I think the one chink in Patty Jenkins' armor as a director was the villain. Ares was terrible. Ares was a terrible villain. And that's not because of the actor David Thewlis, because David Thewlis arguably was probably the most talented actor in that movie. He probably was. I mean, he's an incredible actor. That's on Patty Jenkins. And everybody knows I love Patty Jenkins. I worship Patty Jenkins. I think she's incredible. But, you know, Steven Spielberg has his bad day at the office. I think that her use of Ares, I think he was a terrible villain. But again, I think that was on Patty Jenkins. Anyway, so yeah, they've struggled. But then, you know, you're talking about, if you go over to MCU, like Malekith could have been such a great villain. Malekith could have been such a great villain. Not so much. Didn't work out so well. We've had a number of villains in the MCU that have not worked out so well. So here's where it gets tricky for me when asking the question, who has the worst villains, Marvel or DC? Because it really depends on where you want to put your emphasis. I think on average, if you want to take all the villains of the MCU and all the villains of the DCU and want to say on average who has the better villains, I'm going to say on the average, Marvel has the better villains so far. When you're talking about Loki, if you want to talk about Vulture, if you want to talk about Red Skull, things like that, on average. However, if you don't want to look at it in terms of average, if you want to look at it as who has the highest peaks versus the lowest valleys, I think DC has the highest peaks. Like, obviously, you're talking about Heath Ledger's Joker. You're talking about Michael Shannon's General Zod. Yeah, and then they have some lower valleys as well, like with Enchantress and stuff like that. Yes, so in asking the question, who has the worst villains, it really all depends on how you look at it. Both companies have struggled. Both of them have put out some duds. Both of them have put out some really strong villains. And on average, I think both companies are in general failing when it comes to their villains. And you know what? I'm going to plead the fifth on this. I'm going to call it a push. I'm personally going to call this one a draw. I think it's just too close to call right now. I think just both companies have not done great. They've both had some success, but neither of them have done great with their villains so far. So, you know me, usually when it comes to who has the better this, Marvel or DC, who has the better that, Marvel or DC, I'll usually pick one. But I'm not just trying to cop out on this. I swear to God, I'm not just trying to cop out. I honestly see this one as a push. I really do. But the important thing here is, how do you guys see it? Do you think Marvel has struggled more with their villains, or do you think DC has struggled more with their villains? Usually we like to talk about Marvel and DC in terms of what they're all doing great, but this is one of the things that both of these companies could stand to do some improvement on and have some improvement with. All right, let's move on now to the next question. I like this one. So this question comes to us from one of my Patreon supporters, Ethan Canistra, who writes, "Hi, John. Love the podcast. Thank you so much, Ethan. And watch every day. Do you think we will ever see Jon Bernthal get larger roles in movies? This year, we saw him in the first 10 minutes of Baby Driver and a few minutes in Wind River. I know he's a very successful television actor with being the Punisher in Daredevil and about to get his own spin-off series, but I would love to see him get larger roles in movies." Well, thanks a lot for the question, Ethan. And yeah, Jon Bernthal is a pretty hot name right now. I've told the story before. I've always liked Jon Bernthal, but when they first announced him as Punisher, I thought, I don't know if that's a good fit. Like, I think he's a really good actor, but I don't know if that's a fit. And then we saw him in Daredevil season 2, and it's like, nope, he's a perfect fit. He's great in that. Now, you mentioned he pops up in Baby Driver, small role. You mentioned that he popped up in Wind River, one of the best movies of the year so far. Might be my number 2 best movie of the year so far, after Logan. But he's got a small role in Wind River. It was really great to see him in that. But let's also not forget, he was just recently in The Accountant with Ben Affleck. And there are whispers that they may be doing a sequel to The Accountant, which I hope they do, because The Accountant is one of those movies that didn't do great at the box office, and I think it deserved to do great. I love that movie. I love The Accountant. And Jon Bernthal plays a significant role. I mean, obviously, it's Ben Affleck's movie. Bernthal is not the main character, but he plays a significant role. And I'm not going to give spoilers away or anything like that, but you know if they do a sequel, he's probably going to pop up in the sequel as well. But again, not major lead. You know what? It comes down to this. There are some actors who are great at what they do, and they're just not meant to be a lead Hollywood movie actor. A good example of that, I'm going to adjust this chair here. Obviously, I'm in the hotel, so it's not like I have my office chair here. Look at Rob Schneider. Rob Schneider is a terrific comedic second fiddle. a lot of movies that Rob Schneider's in where he's the comedic second fiddle or even third fiddle or a little bit further down the line, he's usually really solid and sharp. You put him as a lead in a movie and it doesn't exactly work. I can't help but wonder. I'm not saying this is the case. Let's be clear. I'm not saying this is the case. I'm just saying I'm wondering. I'm wondering if Jon Bernthal is just one of those guys who's going to have just an incredibly successful career doing what he does, but isn't necessarily a leading guy in a movie. And yet will go on to have a really successful career, be in a lot of really good movies like he has. Like you just mentioned, Wind River, Baby Driver, The Accountant. I mean, he's been in some great movies. Maybe that's just what he does best, is playing the supporting role and just elevate a movie from the supporting role. Maybe that's what he does best. Again, I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying maybe that's him. But it seems like so far no studio has looked at him, and none of the casting people seem to have looked at Jon Bernthal and thought, this is our leading guy, other than obviously Punisher. And Punisher worked out great in Daredevil Season 2, which is why we're getting a television spinoff. Let's see how he does in that. But that situation, I think, for Bernthal could change. If Punisher is really well received and people love it, yeah, I think you could see Jon Bernthal starting to get a lot more expanded roles in a number of movies. That could happen. But again, it all depends on Punisher and how good have the trailers look so far. Pretty damn good. All right, let's move on to the next topic now. The next topic comes to us all the way from Gordon McIntyre, who writes, while scrolling through some Netflix/Amazon, I've noticed so many Lego films. There's DC, Marvel, Star Wars, even Ninjago. Why would parents pay to take their kids to see Lego Batman or Ninjago in cinemas for over 25, well, obviously you're in Europe, but $20 when there are 5 others on Netflix for free? Sure, they're not as high quality, but most kids, hell, even some adults, don't know any better. Do you think this could affect the box office? Is Lego cannibalizing its own brand? That is a great question because, Lego Batman came out and it did not do as well as, the Lego movie. And Lego Batman was awesome. I mean, Lego Batman is a wonderful film. Lego Ninjago came out. And you know what? I was surprised. I thought it was pretty solid. It's the worst of the Lego movies so far. But even as the worst Lego movie so far, it's still pretty entertaining. I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty good. But it's not killing it at the box office. And you know what? You bring up an excellent point that I honestly hadn't really considered before. The fact that if you hop on Amazon Prime or Google Play, or if you hop on Netflix, there is so much Lego animated content. There is so much of it out there that you bring up an interesting query. Could that fact, the fact that parents say if their kids want to see Lego Ninjago, just hop on Netflix. If the kids want to see Lego Star Wars, just hop on Netflix. If my kids want to see a Lego movie, just pop it up on Netflix and get one of these made for direct-to-video ones. Could that be affecting the box office? You know what? Again, I had not considered that possibility before, but I will go out on a limb and say, yes, I think you're right. I think you're onto something. Now, I don't think it's the be-all, end-all explanation for why these Lego movies are underperforming compared to the quality of movie that they are, because I think they're pretty high quality. So I think they're underperforming in terms of how good the movie actually is, so they deserve to do better. But I think you might be onto something. What do you guys think? Do you think that, and maybe some of you guys are parents, has the fact that there's so much Lego animation content available for free pretty much, has that hindered you or given you pause for paying 20, 30, 40 bucks to take you and your kids and maybe a couple of your kids' friends to go see a Lego Ninjago movie? I'm curious to know. Jump into the comments section and let me know. All right, move on now to the next question. And this next question is a fun one. It comes to us from Jeff Dyer. And Jeff Dyer writes, do you ever find your opinion of a movie changes over time for good or bad? In other words, your initial opinion isn't always the most reliable. I remember seeing Superman Returns in the theater and loving it. But I admit, hearing other views on the movie, not enough action, etc., did sway my own opinion and as time passed. Have you ever loved or hated a movie at first and then gradually change your opinion as others discuss it or as you think about yours more? Thanks a lot for the question. Very, very rarely. It's been extremely rare that I have ever changed my opinion on a movie over time or whatever. I can think maybe once out of every 200 films or so. Maybe once out of every 200 films. So that's 0.5% of the times that what I thought about a movie will change. And by change, I mean change significantly. Like there are lots of movies that I see that, oh, I love this movie. I give it an 8.5, and then maybe later I'd say, I would lower that down to about an 8. But that's minor. That's a small budge in that. That happens more often. But they say something that I would have given a 4 out of 10 to, that then later I would give an 8 out of 10 to. Or something I would have given a 9 out of 10, and then later I'd give it a 6. Like a major shift like that. I can only think of a couple instances in my entire life that happen. Again, maybe once out of every 200 or 300 films. The two most obvious ones, because I've told these stories before, one is Inglourious Basterds. I straight up hated Inglourious Basterds the first time I saw it. And I don't know why, but I watched it the first time and I straight up hated it. And I've told this story before. But fast forward a little while later, I'm hanging out with this girl and she wants to watch a movie. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do whatever this girl wants to do to have a good time. So she wants to watch a movie and she goes, oh, I love Brad Pitt and I haven't seen Inglourious Basterds yet. And I'm inside my head, I'm like, oh, don't make me watch that again. But she wanted to see it and I wanted her to be in a good mood. So I'm like, okay, let's watch Inglourious Basterds. And we're sitting there and watching it. And I'm watching this movie and I'm like, what? Is this the same movie? Like, what was going on in my head the day that I watched this movie? Because I love this movie. This movie's great. And before I completely hated it. So it wasn't other people's opinions. It was just sitting down to watch it again. And all of a sudden I'm like, was I in a bad mood that day? Like when I went to go see Inglourious Basterds the first time, was I just in a bad mood or something like that? So that's a big highlight one. The other one is obviously the prequels. The prequels, I just drank the Kool-Aid. And every time, but at least every time I watched, like say The Phantom Menace, because I watched it like 17 times in theaters, because at the time I was also working at a visual effects company and it was the most amazing visual effects spectacle ever made. So me and my coworkers would go and watch the movie like twice a week. We would go watch The Phantom Menace just for the visual effects. But every time I watched that movie, I realized I liked it less and less and less and less and less and less and less. So that's it. But like, again, one out of every maybe 2, 3, maybe even 400 films that happens with me. It doesn't actually happen to me that often. Maybe it happens to you guys more. Jump into the comments section. What are some films that you can think of that you either loved or hated at first, and then later you saw it again and your mind completely changed? It went the opposite way. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Jump in the comments section and leave your thoughts. All right, we move on now to the final question of the day before I go over to the Twitter questions. Once again, you can start firing in some Twitter questions. Tweet me at John Campea. Start your tweet that way. Just start your tweet with at John Campea and then write in your Twitter question and I'll see if I can get some in here. Now, some of you guys will know that I have been pulling the tweets up live on screen. Being here in using other equipment and being here in Vegas, I didn't figure out how to do that in time for this show, but I will try to make sure I have that ready to go for next show. So I'm just going to read your tweets off my phone this time around. But for tomorrow, hopefully I'll have the Twitter thing there so I can bring your tweets up, so I can bring your tweets up on screen. All right, let's go on to the final question before the tweets. And here we go. This final question comes to us from Ace Adams, who writes, Kumusta, big fan from the Philippines. Kumusta? Salamat, my friend. Salamat. All right, so Filipino stuff there for you guys. Anyway, so let's get on to the question. So Ace Adams is writing, The Lion King is my favorite movie of all time. What are the chances the upcoming live-action movie will make $1 billion, since it will be directed by Jon Favreau, the man behind The Jungle Book, who almost made $1 billion last year? All right, well, thanks a lot for the question, man. And you know what? Let me pull this up for a second. I'm going to pull it up on my phone here just so I can double check what we're dealing with. I'm not sure that The Jungle Book didn't make $1 billion. Let me just check here. So Jungle Book, where is it? Jungle Book 2016. It made, well, $966 million. So yeah, The Jungle Book made almost $1 billion. And by the way, I know I feel like every time Jungle Book comes up, we need to pause for a second and go, how good was that movie? That movie was so good. I went to the theater and watched it like 4 times. I had such a good time with it. Almost joined the $1 billion club. Okay, so you got the same director now, Jon Favreau. who also directed the first couple of Iron Man movies. He's now coming in to do Lion King, right? Live action. All right. Will it hit $1 billion? Absolutely no question. No question. It'll hit $1 billion. The Lion King will join the $1 billion club for a couple of reasons. Number one, it is the Lion King. It is maybe the greatest animated movie of all time. A couple of years ago, we did our March Movie Madness tournament, and we had 64 animated films, and sure enough, Lion King won the tournament. I'm so glad that it did, because it is my all-time favorite animated film. It's just amazing. So you've got that going for it. On top of that, you've got this, it's building off the success of what they just had with The Jungle Book. And Lion King right now is a far more, I think is a far more embraced property than Jungle Book was. Jungle Book's obviously an older property, but I think Lion King, again, was voted as the #1 animated film of all time. People love Jungle Book. And now you're building off the success of Jungle Book into Lion King, and you're bringing in that same director. Honestly, unless the movie comes out and the early reactions are the opposite of Blade Runner 2049, where everybody's coming out and tweeting, this movie sucks, this movie's terrible, steaming pile of garbage, blah, blah, blah. Unless that happens, and even if that happens, I don't see Jungle Book having much trouble hitting $1 billion when it ultimately comes out. I'll be shocked if it doesn't. I'll be shocked. Absolutely, it's possible. Maybe it hits $990 million and falls just short. Maybe. I don't know. But I'm just saying right now, I'm going to be really surprised if Jungle Book does not join the $1 billion club. I think it will pretty much no problem. All right now, guys, with all of that out of the way, I'm going to go over to Twitter and take some of your live tweets. I'm going to pull it up here on my trusty phone. Again, my apologies for doing this a little more lo-fi. I am not at home. I'm not in my studio right now. I'm doing this remotely. I think it's pretty awesome that the technology exists that I can actually go on the road and still do this show live for you guys. I'm really excited about that. Okay, so let me pop open my machine here and take a peek and see what we got going on in Twitter sphere. Okay, let's start with this. Zeke A writes, hey, John, do you think It Chapter 2 will be as big of a hit as the first one? Yes, I do think, as long as it's on par quality-wise. Because now you had all this positive word of mouth. People are going to be excited for it. As long as there's no major delays and it doesn't take forever to get this movie in theater, I do think on a success level, I do think it will be as successful. Stang6 writes, hey, John, what do you think of the Spielberg-backed VR experience that AMC Theaters is trying out? I always think it's interesting. I'm not a big fan of gimmick stuff. I think that's one of the reasons I don't like, 4D, and I've never been into smell-o-vision, and I hate 3D. I don't like 3D at all. But you know what? It's always good to try new things. You never get new things until you try new things. And for every great thing you try, you have to go through about 8 things that were terrible that you try to really come out on top. So I think it's worthwhile. Check it out. If you don't know much about it, just Google Spielberg AMC VR experience and you'll get more information on that. Let's see. Cody Leach is writing. Maybe I can show you guys the tweets like this. I don't know. Let me see if this will work. Can I? No, you're just seeing a blurred out white screen. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Again, I will try to have your tweets up on the screen there tomorrow. Cody Leach is writing, hey, John, with you loving Logan so much, do you think the Wolverine could have been as amazing if James Mangold had the same creative freedom? I mean, it's hard to say. Look, I think the R-rated nature and material of Logan was definitely cool and was definitely good for the movie. It absolutely was. But if you remake Logan and just change the things you need to change to make it PG-13. Like, you see a lot of the stabbing, but you don't see any blood. You take out a couple of the F-bombs, because you're allowed to have a couple for PG-13, but you can't have too many. You take out a couple of the F-bombs, take out the blood. Like in other X-Men movies, Logan stabs a lot of people. It's just that you don't see blood. You take out some of the more gratuitous shots, you're still left with a really good movie. Not as good as the R-rated version, but you are still left with a really good movie. Because this is what makes Logan so special. It's not the gore and the swearing. That adds to it because it fits in for sure. Logan works because it's an incredible, old Western style kind of tale. It's a story, and that's what makes it great. So I think Mangold, I think he could have made as an amazing of a film if he started with a great story. The problem with some of the other Wolverine films has been the story, not that, look, you take some of those other Wolverine films and just add some heads being cut off and have Wolverine drop the F-bomb more. You think that magically makes the movie better? You think that magically turns the movie from a bad movie and a bad story into magically a good movie and a good story? No. Those movies suffered because they suffered from poor stories. And, not every director is going to hit it out of the park every time. Spielberg has bad days at the office. Denis Villeneuve will have a bad movie. He will. Eventually, Denis Villeneuve will have a bad movie. Christopher Nolan some people think he already had a bad movie with Interstellar. I think he hasn't had a bad movie yet, but eventually he will. Because when you're creative and you take risks, that means you're going to fail sometimes. That's part of the creative process. So, no, I don't think it would have been much different. I really don't think it would have been much different. Let's see. Alex Melroy writes, John, what are your thoughts on the screening room, movies at home for about $50 thing? Will it actually happen? Yeah, for those of you who don't know what he's talking about, studios have been trying for years, nearly a decade now, to get a premium home viewing service where you can just watch new release movies at home, but instead of renting it for $3.99, you rent it for $50 and you get to watch it at home. Myself, I hate the idea. But that's just me. And that's because of my personal feelings on things. To me, nothing will ever top the movie-going experience. The movie-going experience is king. Christopher Nolan was actually just talking about this the other day. Christopher Nolan, who was kind of trashing and talking smack on Netflix original movies, Christopher Nolan was talking about, you know what? No, movies they're made and crafted to be seen on the big screen, in a theater with an audience. To me, going to movies is an event. I love getting ready and going out with my friends or my wife or whatever and going to the movies. I love it. And there's something about being in a crowded theater with 600 strangers and laughing together and being in shock together and cheering together. There's something, cathartic about it, really, that I absolutely enjoy and I absolutely love, and I hope we never lose. This idea of a home, I'm not going to pay $50 to sit in my living room to watch a movie. I can sit in my living room and watch any movie that's 6 months old or that's a year old. If I'm going to spend that kind of money, I want to go and have a night out. I want to be out with my friends. I want to get together in a crowd. I want to get that movie popcorn. I want to get, if I'm going to spend $50, I'd rather spend it on that. So, but again, remember how I was just saying with the VR experience, you've got to try new things. I think this is something worth trying. As much as I don't like it, I'll defend it and say it's worth trying, because who knows? Maybe I sit at home a couple times and watch it and I change my mind on it. I don't think I will, but it's something worth taking a look at, and it's something worth investigating at least a little bit. All right, let's bring up another question here. John Campea is saying, with the success of It, do you think we will see more mixed horror movies with other genre? It's not as if It has created the mixed genre horror film. We've had lots of mixed genre horror films. I mean, whether you want to go like Shaun of the Dead there are lots of horror films that are there are romantic horror films, there are comedy horror films, there are dramatic horror films. It is the most successful of all time, obviously, but let's not pretend like it's the first one to do it. So let's just see about that. I think more and more in filmmaking in general, we're seeing cross-genre. Obviously, the comic book movies, like we've seen a lot with Marvel, has been crossing genres a lot. We've had comic book political thrillers, comic book, twisted, spaced out, comic book comedies, comic books, heist films. So we've seen that mixture a lot. So it's not just horror that's doing that. Let's see here. Oh gosh, I'm already over 40 minutes. Okay, that will do it for me, guys, for this installment of the John Campea Show. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for your patience, for hanging in there with me, even though I'm not in my own studio. I'm going to be here today, tomorrow, and Friday. And then Saturday, I'll be back in my studio, back at home. But for the next couple of days, I'm going to be coming to you guys from here. Also, keep your eyes open. I'm going to be putting up a review a little bit later today of the new Star Wars canon novel, Phasma. They put out a new novel, Phasma. I read it the other day. I'm going to give my review on that the other day. I like it. So there's a little bit of a spoiler. So that's going to be coming up a little bit later. So make sure you guys come back and check that out. Hey, listen, guys, while you're here, make sure you take a second, click on the subscribe button, become one of my subscribers. And you also, I forgot to do my commercial plug. So bear with me as I do my commercial plug. A little bit earlier, one of the questions came in from one of my Patreon supporters. My Patreon supporters are the people who make this channel possible. Go on over to patreon.com/John Campea. Check that out. I got a whole bunch of information there about what it means to be one of my Patreon supporters. And maybe you can become one of my supporters and be one of the people who makes this programming possible. There are some advantages to being Patreon supporters. All the information is on the page. Do me a favor, go and check that out and see if it's for you. And if it's not for you, that's totally cool. I'm just happy you guys are here joining me for the discussion. So that will do it for me for today, guys. Thank you so much, if I can talk. Thank you so much for joining me. My name's John Campea, and until the next video, bye-bye.